Good evening, everyone. I have 5:30 Central, so it should be 6:30 in Eastern Time Zone. And I'd like to welcome everyone back here to our seventh now session of the Fall 2020 Master Beef Producer Webinar Series. And it's been a great series so far, and I hope you guys are enjoying it and gotten a lot of positive feedback about it. And I think tonight will be another really good session, something that we don't get to talk about a lot and hasn't been as much a part of our master beef producer trainings thus far as it probably should have been. So I'm excited to be able to offer this, and I'll introduce Andrew in a bit. And but I appreciate him being able to put together a presentation about succession planning with your beef cattle operation. So to go through a few things like I've done at the beginning of each of these webinars, I'd like to again mention that we at University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture are a member of the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. And we're really focusing a lot of what we do on the sustainability of your operation. Now, sustainable and sustainability can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. The way we look at it is not just environmental sustainability, although that is an integral part of it, but also economic sustainability, and specifically to what we're talking about tonight, generational sustainability. And that's as much, I think, an important part of our long-term planning and thinking as it should be as important a component of that as anything else that we talk about. So being a member in the Institute of the U.S. Roundtable, Dr. Gary Bates is our representative to that group, and he was able to create some networking opportunities with Golden State Foods and Nestle. So they are specifically within the U.S. Roundtable, our partners on this, and we really appreciate their willingness to step up and help make this happen so that we can use the Tennessee Master Beef Producer Program to evaluate some of the metrics by which the roundtable measures sustainability. And then also too, as I've kind of already alluded to and mentioned previously in other introductions to the other webinars, that we want to have producer voice in this, and to be able to collect your input and your data that you offer through answering the questions that we'll have scattered throughout these webinars. We're able to integrate the producer voice into being a part of how we define sustainability, how we develop educational material towards sustainability that lines up with what you'd like, and then ultimately to give you information that gives you somewhat of a competitive advantage if the market does end up taking us in a direction that places more value on a sustainably produced feeder calf, for most of you being cow-calf producers in the state. Now, succession planning is a big part of the U.S. Roundtable's educational material on sustainability, and I would really encourage you to visit their website. So if you go to the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef website, they have training modules, and one of these training modules is dedicated specifically to this, where you can do some self-evaluation and do some long-term planning. But we're certainly excited about hearing this information directly from Andrew tonight. So again, just a couple of logistics components to the webinar tonight. If you're viewing this through the desktop application of Zoom, you'll be able to answer questions. So Courtney Carter's one of the other moderators here for this evening, and at specific times throughout the Andrew's talk, then she'll be able to pull up a question. It'll look somewhat like the example that I have here on the screen. And again, if you're on a phone or a desktop application, you'll be able to answer those. I will say that if you're viewing this through a browser, a web browser, then you won't be able to answer those questions, but Courtney will be sending you a follow-up survey after the webinar, and you'll be able to answer those questions there along with some other information. Now, being a webinar platform, we don't have your video on, so your video and audio are not enabled, so you won't be able to communicate in that way, but you will be able to type into the chat, as many of you already have, and it's fairly intuitive, and you'd be able to pull up the Q&A bubble. If you'll just click that, you see somewhere either in your browser or on the application, it'll pull up a box where you can type in your questions. In the previous 6 webinars, I've answered some of those as we've gone along, and mostly just kind of kept a watch on those to assimilate several questions that are similar and be able to ask those directly to the speaker at the end. And I'll do that again tonight. I probably won't be able to answer many of the questions you might type in as we go. It's just not a subject that I'm very familiar with myself. I'll be learning too this evening as much as any of the rest of you. But I will somewhat curate those questions and then try to ask as many as we have time for to Andrew at the end. But we have been trying to be diligent with these webinars and sticking to our allotted time. We want to be respectful of your time. So with that said, I won't take much more time in getting everything started here, and I will introduce our speaker. So Andrew Griffith is our presenter tonight. He'll be talking about farm transition from one generation to the next. Andrew, again, is a colleague of mine, actually a good friend, not just a colleague. He comes from here in Murray County, where my office is and where I'm originating from this evening on this webinar. And farms in Murray County and a little bit further east, but still in Middle Tennessee, also farms. So Andrew went to Tennessee Tech, got his bachelor's degree there in agriculture, and then a master's in ag business and management at UT, and then a PhD at Oklahoma State in ag business and management. So the one more thing I'll say, introducing Andrew without getting too far or taking too much time here, is I'll say that one of the things I really appreciate about hearing his presentations is the fact that he actually does this. He operates himself, and so when he makes suggestions or specifically on marketing or risk management or any of those things, I'm sure the topics he'll cover tonight are things he considers as well. So he's making those comments or those suggestions from the point of view of actually doing it himself. So Andrew, with that, I'll turn it over to you. And as you're unmuting and getting ready to go, I'll stop my screen share so you can pull up your slides. But one last thing I'll say is Andrew will not be having his video on this evening. He's going to conserve some bandwidth to try to make sure that it broadcasts as smoothly as possible. So with that, Andrew, it's all yours, and I'll be watching the questions for you.
All right. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can.
All right. So I appreciate you having me. I don't know how exciting it is to talk about farm business succession planning, and by no means am I the most knowledgeable person about this. I guess about a year ago, I kind of started looking into it and how important it is. When you think about coming off of a farm, having a spouse that comes off a farm, and then you start owning farms yourself. So you realize, I say farms, maybe just owning land. It's there's a huge difference in just estate planning and what I'm hopefully going to discuss a little bit here tonight. My slides are kind of more geared towards estate planning, but most of my talk, so you can read the slides as we go, because I don't plan on just reading them. But I hope to talk about some of the things that we need to be thinking about as far as farm business actual succession planning. This isn't, oh, I'm fixing to die. We've got to get our assets all in line. I mean, that's part of it, but hopefully we'll talk about a few more things that really will help the farm business continue on. And as I said, I mean, there are many more people much more sharp on this topic than I am, but maybe what I talk about tonight will spur some thoughts in each individual that's listening to go out and find more information, start working with some professionals, start the family discussions that are necessary. So the main objectives here is just to understand why this is important for farm businesses. You can talk about this to individuals that own anything, but it's more important for businesses. And this really doesn't. It's not just farm businesses. It's not just farms. Anybody that owns a business that has assets and that plans to pass this on to another generation, whether that be in the family or out of the family, this succession planning is pertinent. Hopefully, we'll point out some of the benefits of having a plan and some of the components that are really necessary to have a complete plan. That's not to say that in some situations a simple plan cannot be sufficient and get the job done, but the key here for most people is going to be to reduce conflict, reduce. A lot of people will think about, oh, how can I keep from paying taxes, and how can we keep that money out of the government's hands because we've built this, and that's where professionals really come in. Working with a tax preparer, working with a tax professional that can really help you with that, and we'll talk about working with those and working with lawyers to develop certain plans and forms that are necessary to carry out a plan. So therefore, we'll look at some of those steps and some of the necessary resources to get to where we want to be.
Okay, I'll take it over for just a second, Andrew. I'm about to launch question 1. You should see it now, question 1 on the screen. And the question is, do you currently have a farm transition plan? Just a simple yes or no. And I just realized I swapped the yes and no on this week. So just make sure you're answering yes or no. Usually yes is on the top. But the question is, do you currently have a farm transition plan? I'll give it about 10 more seconds. Okay, Andrew, I am going to share the results with you so you can see them real quick. You see them?
I can.
Okay.
All right. So, that's actually a larger number than what I expected to have a transition plan. Now, throughout this process, you may decide that you want to change your answer from yes to no because or maybe it might be, do you have a complete transition plan? Because a lot of times we don't think about everything that is possible, and we realize as we think about it and we think deeper about it, or we see experiences others have that maybe our plan is not complete. But we'll carry on here. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that we have a good definition of when I say succession, what I'm talking about. And just the definition, if you go through Webster's, it's just going to be the process of passing one thing to another, something from one person to another. And that seems simple enough. If you're a parent and you have one child and you say, well, I'm going to pass all my house, my car, there you go. All my assets, here they are. But when it comes to farm succession planning, we actually have a change in ownership of something, and that's the business. We realize sometimes we don't always think of our farming operation as a business. We think of it as an operation. We think, well, as long as we're making money, it's good. But we have to very much have a business mindset to achieve the goals that we're wanting to achieve. It's not just profitability at the end of the day, because my primary goal year in and year out for any of my farming operation would be profitability. But at the same time, I have to think, well, at some point I'm going to get to the point where I can't take care of this. What do I want that operation to turn into? Is it my retirement plan to sell everything? Or now that I have 2 children, is my goal for those children, if they desire to farm, is the desire for them to come back and have that opportunity? Do I have a business set up in such a way that they can successfully come back? And so when we think about that whole plan, we have to transfer not only the assets themselves, but the knowledge, the skills, the labor management. Because if you are an operation and you have folks that work for you, all of a sudden, if it goes from one day, there's a 65 or 70-year-old fella that tells everybody, here's the plans for the day, and then all of a sudden it changes to a 30-year-old because he's handing that operation down to his child, then uh, you know, generally that's going to be a gradual process, but we have to assimilate our employees to that in a gradual process. And on top of that, that 30-year-old is not going to be able to know how to make decisions immediately, just like the current owner. And so we have to be able to relinquish some control slowly. It's December 31st, and on January 1, we're going to relinquish all management control, not just being converted to the next generation of our next owner of that operation. It needs to be a gradual process, because all the knowledge, all the skills that was gained in a person's lifetime cannot be transferred in a matter of a couple of months. And so it's very important that we recognize that all those things are very important. And they're probably actually more important than just the transfer of the assets and making sure that the government doesn't get, their 30% or whatever they want out of it. So when you get down to it, there's several different, I've got 5 things outlined here, and we'll try to talk about each of them briefly and kind of give you an idea. But, most people, they think about an estate plan. That's really what they think about. What am I going to do with all my, because there's no doubt, there's only 2 people that I know of that made it out of this world alive, and they're both mentioned in the Bible. And so when you think about it from that standpoint, we just have to expect that we're going to die at some point. So our operation is going to somebody else. Now, do we want to have a say-so in that? A lot of people will want to have a say-so. And so that's where some of this comes into play. But at the same time, so we have an estate plan. That's, that's what most people focus on. But again, I mentioned we have to be able to transition this to the next generation. And that includes that ownership, that management, the knowledge, all those things. At the same time, during that transition, we need to have first of all, is a business owner should already have a business plan of some sort owning a farm. And you need to make sure that business plan during this process is going to move over to the next generation, such that it can continue to operate in a equitable manner and a manner that will get the job done. Because in reality, businesses don't operate in the now, they operate in the future. We have to be looking down the road to what's going to happen in the future, so that we can make successful decisions today. If you're a person, some people do just the last day they farm is the day they die. But some folks actually want to stop farming and want less labor and want less management. And so at that time, you also, these are your assets. This is what you have. This is what you've built up. You may have a retirement plan. You may have a lot of funds elsewhere that keep you sustainable in life. But you need to have a retirement plan of some sort, and that needs to be part of this conversation, as well as a land use plan. So we'll kind of talk about some of those situations and some pitfalls maybe we can avoid. So retirement plan, of course, what we have to meet our own needs as a farmer, and if we're going to pass this business on, it's just like anybody that sells a business. Some of them want to sell the business; they don't want to have any more to do with it, and so they want whatever equity they can get out of that business. And then they take that equity, and that's what, supports part of their retirement. And in some cases, that's going to be the case in farming businesses and farm operations. You should have some type of interest in that business, so that you may still receive funds on an annual basis. So you may still have farm income. That may be part of the retirement plan. And so those things need to be discussed during this process and ironed out, so that generation that's leaving the business will still have enough income to support their lifestyle. I mean, there's still going to be family expenses, and so we need to make sure we cover those along the way. The estate plan, like I said, is probably the one that most people think about, how we're going to distribute all of our assets when we die, or do we start distributing assets before we pass? Doesn't matter. Those are that is a key cog of this, and that's that one thing where you'll be working. It's very important to work with a lawyer that specializes in estate planning. They can really make sure that you have a pretty solid estate plan. They know a lot of the pitfalls. They know the right questions to ask. And it's, it's good to ask around other farmers and say, hey, who have you worked with? Who do you work with? Did they do a good job? So those are things we need to think about. And then this transition plan, the transition plan is actually the plan of transferring that ownership, transferring that management and that control of the business. It's so hard to give up control of things. And it doesn't matter. Our human nature is to want to control everything that we do. As you grow up, you think you can control this, you think you can control that. You get married, you think you can control your spouse. You have children, you think you can control your children. So not only do we think we can control things in the world, we think we can control people. And what we realize is we don't even do a good job of controlling ourselves in most instances. So this is just a good example of being able to learn how to slowly give up control of something. It doesn't have to be 100% in the first day, but slowly put responsibility on the next generation that's going to operate this business. And as you do that, you may become a little more willing to give up some of that control, especially if you see that they're making good decisions that fit all these plans that we're trying to establish. Business plan, we had to have goals for the business. And as somebody exits a business, they still have goals for that business. If you spend a lifetime building a farm and you've got it in good shape, you want to see that continue in a lot of cases, or a lot of people want to see those things continue. So if you don't, there's no problem with that, but you had to have a plan for that. And so that has to be discussed with that next generation of ownership, because if they don't know those goals, if they don't know that plan, then they can't achieve them. And that needs to be, that's a serious discussion with that next generation, because if they don't want to achieve the goals that you have, then maybe there needs to be somebody else that takes over that operation instead of who you thought needed to take over. And then a land use plan. If as you pass that on to somebody else, they may decide that they want to produce something else, or they may decide that they want to go into some other type of business with that land. And so that's something else that needs to be discussed. It just makes me think about a slaughter facility. Everybody, I don't know how many emails I've gotten lately on slaughter facilities. We need more slaughter facilities, these local slaughter facilities. Well, if you live on some land and it's your farm and you're going to pass it on, well, maybe that next generation says, well, I want to build a slaughter facility. And maybe that's not what you want a half a mile down the road from your house. Those things have to be discussed, because all of a sudden land use goes from an ag use to an industrial use. And we have a slaughter facility that's killing, 50 or 60 animals a week right down the road. And it's my son and daughter running it. Or maybe it's, whatever it is, you have to think about those things. So a lot of times the goals of succession planning, we want to maximize the net worth of the estate. Fully understandable. There's no reason why we shouldn't try to maximize the net worth of the estate. It's kind of, you watch, not to mention politics, but I'm going to mention it just because it's a great example. We have a lot of turmoil in the fact that President Trump, well, he only paid this much in taxes. Well, who in their right mind wants to pay more taxes just to be paying taxes? If there's a way around it, and it's a legal way around it, I'm not talking about if he did it legally or illegally. That's not my point. My point is because I can't talk about that. I don't know what it is, but for folks to say, oh, he only paid this much in taxes and he had this much income. And well, all of us sitting here listening to this, there's not a single one of us that went out and worked a day in our life that said, you know what, I really just want to pay more taxes so I can provide something for somebody else all the time. And so, part of this is, hey, we've got all these assets. How can we maximize the net worth of that estate so that it doesn't get passed on? We don't pass this off to the government. So at the same time, you want to distribute assets in accordance with whatever wishes you have. You know, I can't stress this enough. Uh, we, a lot of times when assets are being distributed to children, people want to think that everybody has to have the same amount. You know, equal is not always fair. All right, and equal is not always equitable. So let's just say uh, here you have your farm and you have 4 children. All of a sudden, you know, we're saying that 25% of our assets need to go to all these children. Well, you know, it's different. If one of those children is at home still on the farm, and that's where he or she makes their living on the farm. If he or she is making their living on that farm, and there was nothing wrong with the other 3 going taking off farm jobs and doing their thing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but it would make it really, really difficult because a lot of the assets that are part of that estate are going to be in the land and in the equipment and in the livestock that are on that farm at that time. And so you could end up unnecessarily putting a tremendous burden on that one child that stayed at home to help farm, because now all of a sudden they either have to buy out their siblings, or they have to just what ends up happening in a lot of cases is we sell out the entire farm because this person can no longer make their living on the farm because we've distributed 75% of our assets, and over uh, uh, you know, over 75% of our assets were in the farm and the farm operation. And so those things have to be talked about and discussed because fair and equal is not always fair and equitable for the goals of our plan. We definitely don't, you know, we want to eliminate and minimize those costs that are associated with this process, and, you know, the process of succession, the process of probate, so forth. Everybody wants some part of you money and doesn't want to work for it. That's what we know. Everybody wants some money and they don't want to work for it. I mean, you know, if everybody in this meeting wanted to offer me $100 right now, I wouldn't turn it down. You know, I would just say, hey, here's my address, you know, send it on. And I would have a good bit of income from that. So it's not, none of us are going to turn freebies down like that. But we definitely don't want to be paying out those freebies. So we try to do what we can to minimize those costs. Also, if you have minor children, you know, it's important to have something there. As I said before, that, you know, we're all going to die. The thing is none of us know when. There's no guarantee. So in my situation, I have 2 very young children. At any point, there's no guarantee for my next hour, and so I need to have a plan in place already. You know, that's very key. It's very key. The next to last bullet there, maintaining quality of life after succession. That's very important for the retiring person. I hope what you're seeing in this discussion is that there's a lot of important things for the generation that currently owns the farm and the farm business and the assets. And there's also some very important things involved in this process for the next generation. And there's also some very important things for those that are not going to have anything to do with that farm, but still may have some interest in the farm or the farm assets as we see them. So it's very important to include everybody that could be potentially impacted by any of these decisions. They all need to be in this conversation in some form or fashion. So here's what this is kind of typical. It's not everybody, but you have a farmer. We all like to go out and put out a little labor. I mean, that's the reason why we farm. Because we enjoy some certain amount of physical labor. We enjoy managing something. And in doing that, we end up with ownership of a business. It doesn't matter if it's a full-time business, it's a part-time business. Neither does not matter. It's still a business. Then somehow or another, that farmer gets married. Sometimes they're already married, then they start farming, doesn't matter. But then that farmer and their spouse, they end up having children. And so now things are becoming more complex every day now. Everything is becoming more complex. Then children begin providing labor. I mean, I know how that was. I mean, I don't remember when I was born, but I can remember that I lived on the farm, and then I can remember that at some point I had to start supplying labor to the farm, and still try to supply a little bit, and then of course supply labor to my own farm, and then I try to steal it back from my parents. I did all that work for them. Might as well get as much work out of them as I can, right? So that's how I operate. There you go. But we're all going to get older, because if we don't get older, we're dead. And so there again, that points to the importance of this. We're going to get older. The children are going to become adults. They're going to have they're going to be providing a lot of labor and a lot of management for the farm. They're going to have more responsibilities as well. They're going to have a full living. They're going to have a living wage of some sort, whether that be all on farm or part on farm and part off farm. All those things have to be discussed, and how we're going to achieve these goals, because every individual has goals of their own. And the key is meshing the goals of the current generation, or that older generation, with that younger generation. How to mesh those goals so that everybody, I'm not going to say can be happy, but can at least be satisfied with the direction of the operation, and hopefully the overall outcome. So then what if we have a situation where the farmer and the children's vision for future don't align? That's something that needs to be discussed. If those don't align, then we may have to think about a different plan. Young or old, time's going to come. Simple as that. We don't want somebody else to settle our state or our accounts. That's the whole purpose of this. Do it. We need to get it. It is a chore. It's a process. It doesn't get done overnight. I've unfortunately / fortunately, Justin mentioned that I'm originally from Murray County, and we're stationed there at Spring Hill. So we're both stationed to work out of Murray County. And we've had several farm family losses of people that we all know personally, that were very untimely deaths. And in thinking about that, if those operations didn't have a succession plan in place, all of a sudden you have the government, you have the state settling your accounts and decisions. And they're not always in the best interest of the farm business. I say unfortunately and fortunately, because it's unfortunate that those occurrences happened. It's fortunate that we can see those things, and we can say, you know what? We need to make sure that we're ready. We need to make sure that we have things in line. Because if we don't, we might meet an untimely death, and then our family is stuck with holding this mess, and they have to work through it. Whereas as we could have already done the work, made sure that those things were going to be good for the next generation. There's always disputes. I mean, I've got a brother. He and I don't always agree. I have parents. We don't always agree. I have friends. We don't always agree. There's always a dispute. We're all individuals, and thank goodness that we all are, different. It'd be terrible for us to all be the same. We all have different ideas of how to, here, this is master beef, right? So we all have different ideas how to breed cattle. We all have different ideas of how to feed cattle. We all have different ideas of how to keep cattle healthy. So we realize that we're different, and in that, and we have this asset out here, and let's just take land as our biggest asset in most cases. Well, what are we going to do with this land? Well, one person may want to, if you have two children, well, one may not want to have anything to do with that farm. They just want to sell everything, and they want their money, and they want to, hightail it the West Coast because that's where they want to be. Well, that's great. Carry on. But the thing is the other one may want to continue to farm and have that there, and that's where that generation that currently owns that can work through that because they may have wishes for that farm as well, and so they can settle those disputes. May not leave everybody happy. Everybody may not leave there happy, but respect is something that we have to show respect. And even though we disagree at times, we can be respectful of others. And so that's where this thing comes in. Can't express this enough that communication is going to be the key. It's always the key. You have to let people know what you're thinking. You want to hear what they're thinking, and that is how you'll build this plan. All of this plan, this whole succession plan, which is all these 5 different plans that we mentioned. It's going to take communication to get that done. If you're hiding out over in the corner trying to tell secrets, nobody liked when somebody else was whispering in the corner in grade school, because if somebody's whispering, you just thought they was talking about you, and you got mad, and you was going to whip them after school or whatever it was. Anytime, it doesn't matter if people are whispering today. You think they talking about, especially if they looked at you. They shot a glance your way and they was whispering. You done mad. Secrecy ain't going to help this deal. Especially in times when somebody dies, somebody gets real sick, some tragedy happens. It doesn't even have to be a death. It could be a tornado came through and wiped out the whole farm, and you've got the generation that's fixing to retire because and now it's like, well, they might as well retire because there's no sense in rebuilding all of this themselves because they're not going to get the value out of it. So, hovering over in the corner and telling secrets isn't going to get this done. So you need to go ahead, get it out there. There will still be conflict and disagreements. You bring them to a head quicker than later, or sooner rather than later, it's going to be a good thing. Giving an explanation for a decision is oftentimes, everybody wants to know why, just like kids ask, well, why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? Well, they want an explanation. And saying, well, because God made it that way may not be sufficient in this situation. Or saying, well, because I get to make the decision. It's mine. I get to do that. That's probably not going to be sufficient to reduce conflict. So explaining why you're making decisions, why you're doing what you're doing as you set up a succession plan from all parties involved. And as I said earlier, if assets are not divided equally, it seems to be there's a lot of conflict when there's not assets divided equally. Well, there's 3 of us. I want my third. Right? There's 2 of us. I want my half. Fair and equal. They're not. That's not necessarily how this type of thing plays out. I can talking about communicating wants and desires and discussing succession planning. It's tough to talk about death. It's tough to sit down with here you got everybody still alive, and you sit down at a table and you say, let's talk about this. Well, nobody wants to bring up, well, we're all going to die. We tend to think that the older generation dies before the younger generation. Now, that doesn't always happen, but talking about that is not an easy concept. It's not easy to give power and control over to somebody else. If all you've ever done is farm for a living, kind of identify, people relate you to farming, and all of a sudden you say, well, I'm not going to farm anymore. Well, now, have I lost my identity? Will people still recognize that I was a farmer? I saw something today where 9 out of 10 people in the United States trust farmers. Because we tend to be trustworthy people, people that work hard for a living and work the land, that tend to be honest folks for the most part. So has a favorite child. They favor that sibling over that child. all those things come into play. And so we need a good explanation for why we're making the decisions that we're making. And that also applies to the children that are the next generation that's going to be taking on this operation. Here I've got a brother, and I spend part of my time in Murray County, and I spend part of my time in Grundy County. About half my time I live in Grundy County, half the time I live in Murray County, and my brother spends all of his time in Weakley County. And here my parents have the farm here in Murray County, and he has things that he wants to achieve, and I have things that I want to achieve, and so those things have to be discussed, because I mean, does he want to do something with the farm that my parents have? Do I want to do something with the farm? Can we both do something with the farm that they have? Those things have to be discussed, because you never know. Is it better if we just rent out that farm? Those are things that have to be discussed, and because there's going to be some conflict of some sort, and there's give and take in everything. Somebody does all the giving, somebody does the taking, is what I found out. No, I'm just joking. There has to be give and take from each individual to figure this stuff out. So keys to making it less difficult: plan early. Start before anything bad ever happens. We don't want something bad to happen, and then that's what gets us going on trying to achieve a goal here. Start with things that we can agree on. I had a major not a major advisor. When I was at Oklahoma State, I had a mentor there. He was not my major advisor, but very sharp gentleman in the department out there. And he told us in class one day, and it ended up being a test question. Had nothing to do with the subject matter, but it ended up being a test question, because he had told us, how many positive things do you have to say to overcome one negative thing that you said to somebody? And it takes about 10 positive things that you say to somebody to overcome the one negative thing that you said. So that's where, if we can start with agreeable topics, and get a few of those things, get the train rolling on the tracks a little bit before, instead of derailing it before it ever gets going. Let's get things rolling, because they tend to stay on the tracks a whole lot better if they're already moving. And so that, let's start with something. And in this case, you can see there, maybe everybody wants the farm to stay in the family. And that might be a good thing. If that's not something that we want, if that's not an agreeable topic, you avoid that like the plague, for a little while. But everybody, when you sit down, I mean, this almost is like a sit down at the dinner table and let's discuss this type thing. And you can't do it all in one sitting, because nobody wants to sit there forever. Just like everybody, I think Justin said we're going for an hour and a half on this. At 7 o'clock, we're wiping it off. Your butts get tired. My butt gets tired. I get tired talking. I know most people don't believe that, but I do. And unless it's about agriculture, about cows or something. But the thing is, everybody heard. Everybody wants to feel like they've been heard, and so everybody needs their chance to say something. And it's not where you interject. I mean, I'm terrible at it. I want to interrupt somebody. Oh, well, blah 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 blah. This is no. Give everybody their fair chance to share how they feel and what they think, and then you can start formulating the goals and objectives of everybody and see how they mesh. We all know what assumptions do, and we need to avoid making assumptions. I could assume right now that for our situation, oh, my brother, he's going to stay in Weakley County for the next 70 years until he's over 100, and that's all he's. But that is that a realistic assumption? No, it's not a realistic assumption. I can't make that assumption. Even if he said he was going to do that right now, there's no guarantee that's going to happen. Life circumstances change on a regular basis. So here we're talking about making this succession plan and making this process, but in reality, it's an ongoing process. You have to get it started. You have to have a plan, but it also can change along the way, because the way people view life, their circumstances in life, are constantly changing. So we have to think about how that comes into play. And so how do we need to change this plan as we move along in time? Again, respect, doesn't mean agreeing, but it definitely will aid the process. You have to, we have to show respect to folks. And I realize that people can lose you can lose respect for folks based off of certain things, but we do need to try to show respect as we go through this process, because that will definitely ease tensions to some degree. Who should be involved in the discussion? Every party that you think should be involved needs to be involved. If that's spouses, if that's children, if that's children's spouses, if that's children's children, you think about right now, and we have a very favorable tax structure really for passing assets down in this state. We have a very favorable tax structure. I've seen where those assets are literally skip a full generation. So you go from the essentially grandparents to grandchildren. And the reason why they do that doesn't mean that the middle generation stopped farming. It was just a way of passing those assets on a longer basis, so that they wouldn't, if you've got a 90-year-old today and they're going to pass those down to a 60-year-old, well, in 30 years, that 60-year-old will be 90, and they have a 30-year-old son or daughter, and they're all in the same farming operation. It may be more beneficial for the 90-year-old to pass those all the way down to the 30-year-old to avoid future tax implications that may occur as these assets gain value, appreciate, especially land appreciating. So things that, not saying that's for everybody. I'm just saying that, those are that's the way we have to think about some of this stuff. So everybody need to identify the individual wants and needs. That's kind of the start of the process. Discuss all those individual wants and needs, see how they fit into the overall plan. Then you got to set certain goals that will balance those wants and needs. The need of that generation that's exiting the business, they have to have income. They have to have a way to, they have to have income to continue to live, to provide for their needs and their wants. Maybe they want to take a cruise every month. Well, they're going to have sufficient income to do that. And so that's something that you have to think about, but as well as the new generation coming in. And then you have to actually prioritize those goals. So when I say the purpose of telling you this process is these need to be written. This isn't we just discussed them. These need to be in writing. So we write down these goals. We finally develop goals, and then we prioritize them. We rank those goals, and because there's going to be more than one goal in most cases, and so then we actually prioritize those, and then we can actually develop some type of plan to meet those goals. And so in something that again, another class that I took in grad school, we had a class and it was called goal programming. And so don't worry about what all that means. The purpose of it is there were multiple goals that we wanted to achieve, and we had limited assets to achieve those goals. But the top goal, we rated those goals, and the top goal, we wanted to maximize that top goal while also trying to meet these other goals. And so in doing that, you maximize that top goal. It doesn't always get fully maximized to what it could be, because you still are trying to meet these the secondary goal, the third goal, the fourth goal. And so at the end of the day, you have a total maximum of meeting those goals in such a way that the most benefit comes from that. And so that's what that's talking about. I'm not sure that a simple Excel file could achieve that in as big a deal that we're talking about. But you could create a rubric. You really could create a rubric that ranked these and gave a certain score such that you could mathematically or statistically achieve that process. I'm not saying go to that trouble. I think if you have these written down, you can think through the process and do that. And then actually, after you write those down, actually develop that plan and then actually go through with that plan. So the action plan, set goals and objectives, set a target for reaching those goals and objectives. So I told you this isn't an overnight thing. So we sit down on night one and we start discussing this. And it's, it may be several months before we have a full plan in process, before we have our goals and objectives and action statements all put together. But after we get that put together, we need to actually set a target for when we reach those goals. So, hey, we want to have a plan put together within the next 12 months. And then when we have this plan, there's certain targets that we need to be reaching to meet those goals that are inside of that plan. And you need to, there needs to be a deadline for each of those. And it needs to be a pretty hard deadline. It's not something that you need to put off. That's one thing that I've learned is, Justin knows how this is. You start applying for grants and funding and this, that, and the other, and there's a hard deadline on those things. You don't get to turn it in a day late. If you turn it in a day late, you're not going to be, there's no way you're going to get those funds. It's kind of like TAEP. TAEP has a hard date. If you don't meet that goal, if you don't get your stuff in by that date, you're too late. It's tough. Guess what? Wait till next year is what it amounts to. And so, we have to set those goals and those deadlines, and we have to meet those and make sure that we do that. And then specify who's responsible for each of those. If somebody going through in the church that I attend in Grundy County, so I attend church in Murray County some Sundays and attend church in Grundy County some Sundays, but they always have, they have a specific project going on there right now, and if you don't specify who's responsible for a certain part of that project, the likelihood is that it won't get done, or less likely, but still possibility is it gets duplicated. There's no need for two people to do the same thing. And there's definitely, it's even worse if nobody does nothing. So if we get in a situation where nobody did anything to achieve a goal, we're in a dire situation. So we need to specify who that is. Then they have the timeline, they can get that done. And then we look at our resources that we have to achieve those goals. And then at the end of it, we kind of evaluate the progress that we're actually making to meet those goals. I mean, that's not just for succession plan. That's how you should tackle most problems. Now, we don't always put it in writing, whereas I suggest the succession plan should be in writing. This succession and transition plan should definitely be in writing. There's a lot of things that we go through that whole that same action plan, even though it may not be in writing. It could be every day we set out to, this is our goal. We want to get 100 acres of corn planted today. That's our goal. We've got that. This is who's going to plant corn. This is who's going to spread fertilizer, so on and so forth. This is who's spraying. That's how this thing works. And so we delegate those things. And by the end of the day, everybody knows that I had to have spread fertilizer on 100 acres. I had to have planted 100 acres, and I had to have sprayed 100 acres. And it's due by the end of the day. And we have a hard deadline. And at the end of the day, we got 92 acres done. Well, our goal is bad thing or not. Well, no, maybe our goal was a little far-fetched, but we came close, and so we kept at it. Or maybe something broke down, and that so we had to end up fixing equipment, so we troubleshoot. And that's going to happen through this process as well. So the estate plan. The first thing you have to know is what you have. And very few people actually know what they have. And when I say they know what they have, they don't know what the true net worth is. Well, they know they own this many acres, and they know they have this many tractors, and they know they have this many cows. And but the thing is all those things have a value. And we can go through it, and not just the tractors. We have this little implement over here that we've only used once every 3 years, and we have that other little implement over there. And we have these barns, and we have, we have an orchard. We have fruit trees of some sort. They have a value. Those are if they're part of the operation, they have a long-term value. And so we have to go through that. It's a terrible, strenuous process to go through and actually value all of these assets. I'm not saying you have to go all the way down to the picture frame of that you have of little Timmy. That's not what I'm saying, but we do need to go through and have a good idea what our total net worth is, so that we can actually start doing something with an estate plan. In doing that, you have to know what you own and its value. You have to know what you owe and its value. And then that'll help you get a financial balance sheet to get a net worth. Hopefully we're not passing on a bunch of liabilities to the next generation. There will be instances where we do pass on those liabilities to a certain degree, but we don't want to be passing on such large liabilities that it's going to be hard for them to overcome, because that really will influence their business plan moving forward. Then we have to think about what business and organizational structure we have. If it's a sole proprietor and there's no laborers, there's hired labor, the management structure is very simple. But beyond that, let's just say that we have one generation and they're actually passing the farm on to two generations. I can actually think of a situation of some folks I've worked with where it was two brothers, and then they have children that are part of the operation, and these operations, pretty large. But how to, so you got two brothers, and well, they have evidently it's definite that they're going to have they get to make certain decisions. They focus on this decision, and the other one focuses on these other decisions. Well, then they're passing it down to even farther to more family members who are in operation. How does that management structure continue on? And so you kind of have to set that up and make sure folks know what their responsibilities are, who makes those decisions, how are we going to allocate everything, and so forth. The financial structure of these operations, how are they financed? How's income distributed? A lot of sole proprietors, they just have, well, that's part of my income. It's what goes in my ordinary income. I don't even have a separate bank account. Do you have a line of credit? Here you are, if you're the operator now, you have a line of credit and you're operating, you put 1,000 acres of something in the ground, or maybe you have 500 cows, or maybe you buy 500 head of stockers every year, and the way you buy them is through the line of credit at your local bank or the farm credit or whatever it is. But the next generation, they don't even have credit. Here they are, they're straight out of college, they're 22 years old, man, they're ready to go. The generation that currently owns the farm passes. They don't have a whole lot of knowledge, but worse than not having any knowledge, they can't buy the sitting next set of stocker cattle because they don't have a line of credit, and your lender doesn't even know who they are. They've never met your son or your daughter who's going to take over the operation. And so then what do? You had the bank account in your name. How do they get a hold of that money that, maybe you didn't have a line of credit, but all the money was in a certain bank account and it was only in your name? Well, how do they get to that money? How do they get it out? Well, it's got to go through the whole process now. And so now they can't get a hold of those funds. The legal structure of this thing. There's just so much that's involved in this. And the whole purpose of this presentation is not to teach you how to address all of them. It's to make you aware of them and hopefully maybe get you on a thought process of the things that could happen, maybe not what you expect to happen, but it's kind of expect the unexpected in a lot of cases. If we're talking about estate planning, generally you have to have a will. It's good to have a durable power of attorney for finances in a lot of cases. And then you might need an advanced care plan and a healthcare agent for a living will and so forth, because there might be situations where you no longer can make decisions but you're still alive and you need to have something going on there. So why a will? You need a will just because it's important to know, you'll be able to say how your assets are transferred. If you have dependents, name a guardian for those dependents. If there's money that you want to go to the church or go to this organization or that organization, you can state how much you want going to those organizations. Name an estate executor. You want somebody that you can trust, somebody that is going to be thorough, somebody that's going to do the job, somebody that's going to stick with it, because it doesn't appear to be a very easy job. There's a lot of professionals that will help get each individual through that executor through that process. But if you've never been through it, I only can imagine that it's very difficult and sometimes nerve-wracking. Probably a lot of lost sleep because of that. So, name somebody that will be very cognizant of the situation and work hard to make sure everything in your estate is settled exactly like you want it settled. Reduces probate expenses and reduce taxes. That's why we use these wills. Again, a continuation of this business or this farm, and just reduce those stress for those left here on this earth as long as it's here. got to have, some main points of a will, date the will's written, person that's writing the will, and of sound mind, your executor, specify bonding of executors required, specify if inventory of assets is required. The thing is, I'm not going to go through because I mean, I don't know enough about this. The key to this is that it's very important to work with a professional, work with a lawyer that knows the ins and outs of this, that has a reputation for doing a good job with these types of wills, especially those of farm business wills, not just those of large estates, but those that have helped transfer businesses to the next generation of ownership, whether that be family or non-family members. You're going to name your beneficiaries in this will. You're going to list some very specific items and amounts and percentages of assets to be given to these individuals. That's where, again, fair is not always equal, or equal is not always fair. That's very, very key in this, because you can very much specify exactly how you want your assets distributed. And luckily they're your assets, so you get to choose that. You don't want to alienate children or spouses or other interested parties, but at the same time, they are your assets as far as you see fit on this earth. When you leave this earth, it doesn't matter to you anyway, but you may want to know who those are going to and how much are going to each person. Residuary clauses, items that not specifically given to someone, how they're distributed, and then the other duties of the executor that you want them to oversee. There's a bunch of different types of wills. I show you here. There's handwritten, simple, sweetheart. In most cases, for most folks that have a farm business or business of any sort, a complex will is going to be more appropriate. And that's why I'm stressing that you work with a professional lawyer to achieve this. You need to already have a good idea of how you want things set up when you go in. A lot of times, if you contact one of these lawyers, they'll actually go ahead and send you a list of questions so that you can evaluate and you can bring a lot of information to them. And when they do that, that's a good thing. It's a good thing that they send you those list of questions, because most of the time those people are getting paid by the hour. Now, if it's a simple will of some sort, they may have a set fee. They say, well, it'll cost you $500 for a simple will, and doesn't matter where that's how. But for these complex wills, most of the time they're going to be on an hourly basis, and so they send you these questions, and they want you to get as detailed as you can, so that they're saving you money. They want you to bring the information so that you're getting your biggest bang for your buck in that situation, instead of sitting there in their office or they're sitting at your table and you're wasting time and they're still charging you their $300 an hour fee or whatever it is. There's going to be assets that aren't transferred by a will. Accounts with named beneficiaries, such as life insurance, IRAs, 401ks, those types of things are not going to be transferred by will. They've already got a beneficiary, and that's who it'll be distributed to. Jointly held property generally have a right of survivorship, and so therefore, if you and your sibling both own a piece of land and you pass, then it's going to be transferred to your sibling. If you and your sibling both have that land, and then you're both you have children that are farming that land too, well, then all of a sudden that runs, oh boy, we run into a problem there. And so, how you set that up is very key, because I can, my wife and her sister, they bought a little piece of land together before we were ever married. And, if my wife passes prior to her sister passing, well, that land will go to her sister. I don't have a problem with that. That's perfectly fine to me. The same way the other way, if her sister passes, it's going to go to my wife. And that's just how that's how those things are set up. But in some cases, that might need to be part of the discussion to see if there's something else we need to do with that in case something happens. Think about jointly held bank accounts or accounts that are payable on death designation type things, so that those funds can be extracted and used. There are expenses to when folks die, and so being able to take money out and pay for those certain expenses could be very valuable through this process. The power of attorney. somebody's can handle all the financial matters. We need somebody that can do this. Need to have them designated far before they're ever needed. And you might have to update that along the way if something happens to those people, or they decide that they don't no longer want to serve in that role. You know, appointing a conservator, it can be extremely expensive. So essentially, you're paying somebody to come in and look over all these financial matters and take care of them, as opposed to the power of attorney being appointed and doing this because they have an interest in. It's effective when it's written. There is an alternative where the person could be incapable of handling the affairs, so and such forth. But the power of attorney, their authority completely ends when the estate owner that passes. So as soon as that happens, everything goes into the executor of the estate. So it's very important to have those two positions filled with folks you can trust and that you know will do a good job. I'm not going to talk about advanced care plans, but that is something that's pretty important. We can set up trust. You know, the common uses of the trust is so that we have funds for raising those dependents that that are still there if we pass. You know, we want to make sure they're taken care of until you know we have folks that that just can't take care of themselves for one reason or another, and we need to make sure, you know, if you're a family person, you want to make sure they're taken care of, and that's, you know, setting up a trust is one way of doing that. Also, it makes those funds available for the continuation of the farm business. So we have this trust set up so that we can continue, you know, the crop's always in the field, or we're always marketing something, or we're always buying something. And so we have to have funds available and make sure things continue to flow even throughout this entire process. Again, we really want to reduce the value of any estate tax. Tennessee no longer has a state estate tax. We just fall under the federal estate tax, and so there's a lot of operations that won't even meet the current threshold. But if we don't re-up that threshold, there's a lot of farms that are going to fall under the threshold that is very old, because if you have any assets at all, you can very well fall under that situation. And I'll give those numbers here in a little while. But testamentary trust, I'm going to just kind of bypass this for now, because it's not of the most important of what we're looking at, but it still falls under that trust situation because it can be useful for us. A living trust, still, you know, any of the assets outside the trust will still require probate. But again, I'm just going to kind of, because I think everybody needs to do their due diligence in looking in what types of trusts may benefit their operation, and working with that lawyer that specializes in this type of estate planning can definitely help with that. Need to have a primary and a secondary beneficiary on all your IRAs and 401ks. It keeps these things out of probate, and that way this money can just be passed on, and don't have to worry about it. If one of your beneficiaries dies, then you need to update that. It's very important to have a primary, secondary, because hopefully they don't both pass away at the same time you do, kind of thing. And so that way these things can just skip the whole process, be put in, and you're good to go. Gift tax. You know, some folks with large quantities of assets, especially very liquid assets, it can be found valuable to use the federal gift rate, so that you can give money to individuals and not be taxed on it. The current federal gift tax is at $15,000. So essentially, if you've got two spouses, they can give up to $30,000 a year to as many individuals as they desire and avoid taxes. So in essence, it's like this: my parents could give me $30,000 right now, and I wouldn't have to pay any taxes on it. They could also give $30,000 to my brother, and he wouldn't have to pay any taxes on it. And if they so desired, they could send $30,000 to anybody else, however many people they want to. They could, if they wanted to reduce the possibility of having estate taxes, they could be giving these dollars away if they might potentially exceed the estate tax threshold. Like I said, the Tennessee gift tax law was repealed long ago, so there's no state gift tax. There is just a federal gift tax, and that's 15,000 per individual to an individual. So it's same way with me. I could give each of my children $15,000 myself right now, and they wouldn't have, there's be no tax to them. And my wife could do the same to each of them, and we could carry forward. The estate tax is currently at 11.58 million per individual. So technically for a couple, that's a little over $23 million. Now the problem with that is this was written as an extension 4 years ago, and if we do not re-up that legislation that increased the estate tax to 11.58 million per individual, then this could very quickly go south, and that total number be reduced. Nowadays you don't have to own a whole lot of land or a whole lot of equipment to exceed 11 or 12 million dollars worth of assets. It just is not difficult in today's time. It's amazing how these things have appreciated to some degree, and so you need to think about how that is. Probate, just a legal process to distribute the estate according to the provisions of the will. It's just a process you got to go through. Maybe feel a little slow, but it's a process, and it's got to be done. Here's the basic steps for that. I know everybody has seen those newspaper ads where they put notice to creditors. You've got 120 days to do something about that, and so that's what you do. They're still out there. So if you see somebody that owes you money and they've passed, well, then you can do something about getting your money back through this process. And after 120 days, then you can go on and proceed. So petition the court for probate, appoint an executor, notice to creditors, securing a bond for executor, and then assemble an inventory and appraise the property. So that's pretty much the process for all that. Classification and payment of demands against the estate. Then we finally get the management and sale of the property. However we're going to do that, payment of state and federal taxes, and finally we get the accounting to the court and distribution of the property. So it goes through all these steps, about 8 or 9 steps here, to finally get through this whole process. And like I said, it's probably just a laborsome, seem like a long thing, but it is a process, and it's these folks that'll help you through this process. They've done it thousands of times, and they know the process, and it's just a matter of getting it done. Not saying it's a good process. I've never had to go through that process myself, but I've seen a few others that have, and it doesn't appear to be very enjoyable. But I guess you get a headache, just take some Advil. Again, some more things that we're going through. Just what the executor has to do, everything that they have to do. Even when everybody dies, there's still bills to pay, and there's still debts coming in. Here you have a home, and well, the water and electric bill still have to be paid. The gas bill still has to be paid. Doesn't matter. You're trying to take an inventory of everything that's there, so that we can get a full value on everything. You got to prove that these people are dead. You can't just say that they're dead. You got to prove. So you got to have these copies of death certificates. Everything has to be a process, and we've got to get through it. The executor is going to file tax returns if necessary. They'll manage the whole probate process and the property and convert to cash if that's the desire of everybody. They also will defend and bring lawsuits if necessary. If there's folks that owe money to the estate, they will lead that process, and then they will be the ones that actually distribute the property. So the executor has a lot of duties, and they have a lot of responsibility, and that's why I said it's very, very important that you appoint somebody as executor of your estate that you trust, and that they will morally do what's right, and they will be very adamant about getting through this process in a timely manner and a complete manner. The key professionals that I think folks need to consider, attorney and accountant are definitely the top two. Uh, there are other folks that could be beneficial. Insurance agents, financial planners. Who thinks about a forester? If let's just say you have 1,000 acres and 500 of it's in uh, timber. Well, all of a sudden there's a lot of value in timber there, and you may have the nicest walnut grove on top of the hill up there, and it's all veneer gray walnut, or maybe you have the best white oak for wood flooring or for whatever it is. Maybe you have veneer grade white oak. Those things have value. So you have to, that's how you get timber appraised. Essentially, is through a forester. You need a good appraiser. They're going to come out and appraise those assets, especially land assets. Again, you should have already been working with those bankers and those loan officers at some point in this, because you definitely don't want to leave somebody hanging and not know who they are. And it could come to a situation where you had to have a mediator or a counselor for the family to get through the whole process. Hopefully, it doesn't come to that, but there are situations where that may occur. The attorney is a necessity, in my opinion, for a farm. Don't just get a willy-nilly one. Find somebody that focuses on estate and succession planning, and specifically find one that has done some farm estate and succession planning. You'll be much more satisfied with the process. I don't know if Justin and Courtney are supplying these slides to the participants. I'm hoping they are in some form or fashion, or I hope that you can get a hold of these. But here are just some key questions that you might ask an attorney to make sure they are what you want and who you think they need to be, and what if they're going to actually fulfill the needs that you're wanting. I go through and read them all because there's a bunch of them, but you want to know if they've ever done it before. You want to know how much they charge. It's just do they have a team of folks that are going to be helping with this? What other resources do they have to help with this? Is there any conflicts of interest in this? It may not be best to have your brother that's a lawyer do this. He may have a conflict of interest there. So, or maybe it's your sister's third cousin or something. I don't know. Things to think about. Some things that you ought to bring to your first meeting with your lawyer: a business plan, a summary of the family business and the organizational chart. They have to have an idea of what's going on. Some type of written proposal or transfer plan. They have to have an idea of what you're trying to achieve. That's why I said, a lot of times they will send you a list of questions. If you've contacted one, they will send you a list of questions so that you come prepared, so that they can work more efficiently and save you a few dollars. Your balance sheet, we talked about that earlier, assets and liabilities. That's something that everybody should have just in a business plan, not just in a succession plan. Recent tax returns, financial statements, whatever it be, personal income tax returns. All those things are very key to making these decisions. Legal descriptions of the properties that you have, copies of mortgages, deeds of trust, leases of property, list of oral agreements, financial statements. I mean, all these things are very key. And if even some of the most basic and simple farms, these things can get pretty lengthy. And the purpose, again, is not for me to give you all the information, because I don't know everything about this subject that I need to know. But hopefully this is spurring some thoughts to say, hey, I didn't think of that, or I need to think of this. And it probably even make you think of some things that I haven't even discussed, that I can't even think about. Think about the list of those folks that owe you money or who you owe money. I do not like owing people money. I despise it. I can't stand it. And there's people, well, don't worry about it. I'll get it so-and-so. And I understand that. I'm the same way. I'll tell people the same thing. But I just like to get people paid. And so, who you owe money to, hopefully that list is short. Marital agreements and divorce decrees. You don't want, here you went through a divorce. You don't want the the former spouse to pop up all of a sudden and, well, oh goodness, part of that's mine. We've been divorced for 23 years, but part of that's mine. Where's my part? And so those are things to think about. Know how the attorney bills, fixed fee per service basis or hourly basis. You kind of want to know what it's going to cost you. But let me back up. But don't let the legal fees and how much it's going to cost you be the reason why you go with a less experienced person, because sometimes you pay for what you get, and it may be. I tell people, I use a fellow that ran a track hoe for me. I'm all about getting rid of trees, and there's a gentleman here that I was told about. I mean, I'd never met him, didn't know him, never heard his name, but they said, "Oh yeah, he's man, he's who you want." And I got him down to the farm to do some clearing, and he is worth every cent and some at how efficient he is at running that. So it doesn't matter if he was more expensive than the other guy. He was so efficient that his higher charge rate actually was less for me because of how efficient he was at doing his job. And so I say that not because I've had multiple people in the Hampshire farm, but I had a fella doing some similar work at the Grundy County farm, and the Grundy County farm's rate was a little lower than the guy that was doing the Hampshire farm, but he was not the operator that the guy doing the Hampshire farm was. He did a good job. That's not what I'm saying. Both gentlemen did good jobs with what they were doing. But what I am saying is that some people are more efficient than others, and I think I got good value out of both gentlemen. But sometimes it's worth paying that little bit extra just because of how efficient somebody can be. So with that.
Okay, let me pull up the
8 minutes to spare.
Okay, you should see question 2. The question is, due to this meeting, are you going to develop or improve your farm transition plan? And then if yes, when will you implement this? Man, there's a lot of people raising their hands. Can you believe that, Justin?
Not really, but I guess I have to since I said it.
All right, I got a good joke. You ready? Have you ever heard of the garlic diet? Have you ever heard of the garlic diet, Andrew?
No, I never have.
Well, you don't lose much weight, but from a distance, your friends think you look thinner.
I need a rim shot sound effect or something, or one of those wah wah wah.
Okay, ended polling and shared it with you, Andrew, just so you can see. And then I'm gonna do the questions you sent me. Good?
Yeah, buddy.
Okay. We have some additional questions tonight. So technically question number 3, where should a person start with a farm succession plan? You should see that question now and you can submit your answers. Where should a person start? Well, maybe never mind. Hold on, I haven't launched it. I don't think.
I saw it on my end, Courtney.
Oh, okay. Where should a person start with a farm succession plan?
So, Andrew, you developed these questions just to get a feel for the information they picked up. Is that correct?
Yeah. I want to. This is a very involved topic, and literally, Justin and Courtney, you could spend an entire 7 or 8 sessions discussing this to get in depth. And so I'm hoping, I wanted to make sure that I'm not, this isn't do y'all know how to do it? It's more, did I teach it in such a way such that I got the correct information across? So it's more of a check on me to see if I'm presenting it correctly.
Great.
Share those results with.
It's very key. Yeah, and I would say, I would say that the majority of 80% of people answered it correctly in my mind. Now, does that mean that the other answers are wrong? No, that's not, that they're not wrong. But in my mind, you start with that family discussion, and that's how I tried to present this.
Okay, another question is live on the screen now. And the question is, what would you consider to be the most important part of a six-session plan? So what would you consider to be the most important part of a six-session plan?
And Courtney, while folks are answering this one, I might just remind everyone that if you don't happen to be watching this on the desktop application or the application on your phone, you won't be able to answer the questions. But Courtney's been sending out a follow-up email that'll have a survey link in it with these questions, correct?
Yes, yes.
I'll say something about this question. My thought on this question was to let me know where more time may need to be spent in the talk and on this topic, because if we have a certain thing that people think is more important than something else, then I may need to spend more time on that particular topic. So that was the gist of the reason for the question. And I would, based off of this response, I would agree that the transfer of knowledge to the next generation is the most important. But you can see that that the other ones, there are several people that, so that's very useful for me to know if given this presentation another time.
Okay, and I just shared the final question with you all. The question is equal distribution of assets what is fair and equitable for the farm business? So just yes or no.
Sounds like you have some help this evening, Courtney.
We like helpers.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm gonna give it about 5 more seconds. There's still some answers coming in.
Those little helpers with ponytails, they're pretty fun.
She hasn't been helping much tonight. She's just demanded about 5 different snacks. And I just shared those results with you.
Well, that provides some interesting information there.
And I'll send you all this, Andrew.
Well, I just, the question, and this was more to see how people thought. The question says, is it best for the farm business, not for the family or for the individuals involved? And so, depending on the answer the answer that an individual would supply may depend upon their specific operation, right? But in general, I would have hoped more people would have answered yes, even higher than the 70%, because for a farm business to continue equal is very, very difficult in most farming situations, and an equal distribution of assets. So again, it's not a wrong or right answer, because there's going to be a lot of operations that it's fine that they answered the way they answered, but it gives me some thoughts, and I need to maybe reevaluate how some of my presentation progresses.
And Andrew, again, really appreciate your willingness to put this information together and present it tonight. Especially, I think it's helpful in the Master Beef Producer series. to something that we haven't had a lot of discussion about, specifically within the beef programming. So I think it's extremely useful. Had a tremendous amount of really good questions. And one of the things that I realize that will likely change about this webinar series in the future is, leaving a little extra time for Q&A, because we, just being respectful of the time frame that we set, haven't had a tremendous amount of time to answer a lot of questions in the previous webinars. So in this one, what I've been trying to do in each of those cases is ask maybe an overall question that doesn't necessarily provide an opportunity for you to answer something specific, but would give everybody, more information where to find, or I guess more of an indication where to find this information. One thing I'll say is, before I ask you the one wrap-up question, I'll say that if you haven't yet been there, if you'll go to the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef website, like I'd mentioned earlier when we started, and go to their learning modules, they have an entire learning module dedicated to this as well, and it includes some self-assessments. And I think that'd be a really good place to start on a general overall level, but more specific, Andrew, to a Tennessee beef cattle producer. Maybe just tell them a little bit about the farm managed program and how they can contact their farm managed specialist or you directly to talk more about specifics on this.
Okay, so we have a group of, well, currently 9, but generally 11 area farm management specialists, and those folks work with farms generally on an individual basis, and the reason, the initial purpose of that group of farm area management specialists was for financial planning of farm operations. They've since delved into a few more topics, and I'll go ahead and put a plug in for the master farm manager here.
Great.
Because actually, if anybody is participating in master farm manager next week, I believe they're having a succession talk as well. It won't be exactly like mine. I did ask Kevin and Charlie to let me see what they were putting together, because I didn't want to be contradictory, but theirs is quite a bit different. Some of theirs focuses on what the fact that people are, our producers are getting older, and this is gonna, whereas I wanted to focus more on the actual semantics of what's going on and what you need to be looking at. But those folks work on a lot of talking about assets and liabilities. Those folks can help you develop a lot of financial statements for your operation that can be very beneficial in this planning process. They don't do taxes. Now, we do have a lot of folks in that group that know a lot about taxes, but they don't do taxes. But they can definitely assist in some manner in helping, get people on the right path. At the same time, most of those folks in that group also are very well connected to folks that can help with a farm succession planning, whether that be accountants or attorneys or other financial planning specialists. And so they're regional. We currently have 2 positions open, one in East Tennessee and one in West Tennessee, because of folks taking other positions, but a very good resource for knowing what you have on the farm and how to make sure we have a financial structure so that farm can continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Andrew, I've found them to be extremely helpful, and I've talked to several different ones of them. And one of the things I like too is that if you have if one of the farm management specialists in your area might not have as well developed an expertise in a certain topic like this, maybe they all are networked together and communicate every day with each other nearly, so they know who does in our system have an expertise that might fit your need. So they work with each other to help spread that out. So a really neat network. I think it's a great component of our extension system. And I'll just kind of give again, kind of a couple of plugs here. One to say, if you haven't seen advertisement about the Master Farm Manager course, I'd encourage you to talk to your county agent about that and ask how to get access to that. And when they're going to do their next series, that'd be really good to go through. And just in general, so Andrew is faculty member in our Ag Econ department, and our Ag Econ department, I think, has been good all along, but is quickly becoming one of the best in the country. And the farm management specialists are housed in our Ag Econ department. It's just a really good network of folks with a tremendous amount of expertise and resources in a broad scope of areas that we deal with. So, Andrew, with that, I'll go ahead and wrap us up so we can be close to time and say again, thank you very much for being willing to put this information together and present it to us this evening. I'm sure you'll have some calls and emails to follow up on these questions. And if we didn't answer your question tonight, if somebody typed it in here again, just I'd encourage you to get in contact with your local UT Extension County A&R agent. And if they don't have the answers for you, they can connect you with the folks that do. So thanks again, Andrew. If there's anything else you'd like to say before we sign off.
Just that if you have questions, if you need, I don't know that I can answer them all, but hopefully I can direct you in down the right path. But always available. Shoot an email, give me a call, whatever it takes, and we'll try to help with this situation.
That's great. Thank you, Andrew. So everybody, I hope you have a pleasant rest of your evening. And we have 2 more webinars in this series coming up, I believe, John Beaver and Les Anderson. So we'll talk a little genomics and reproductive management to wrap us up in the next 2 webinars. But until then, I hope you have a safe and productive time. Take care.
Hey, Justin, how many folks are we saying are part of this? How many did you say, 850 or so?
Yeah, Courtney will be able to send you the spreadsheet with everything in it.
That'd be good. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You bet.
See y'all.
See you.